The museum that you're in is Museum of Contemporary Craft. We were founded in 1937 by a group of women who were interested in keeping the artists who came out here to work on the WPA projects like the Timberline Lodge to find a way for them to stay in the area. And they focused a lot on modern ceramics. So we're founded as the Oregon Ceramics Studio in '37. In the 60s we became Contemporary Crafts Gallery, and then in 2007 we moved into this location, which then took on the name Museum of Contemporary Craft. So the exhibition that we have up through the end of October of 2009 is called Call and Response. And what we did is invite 8 artists who teach in Oregon colleges and universities, and each of these artists has craft as a part of their practice. Either they were trained in a craft-based practice or they teach a craft-based practice, and they are paired with 8 art historians, mostly from other institutions, so we create cross-institutional and cross-disciplinary, in a way, dialogue. So this is the work of John and Wan-Hee Arndt. They practice under the name of Studio Gorm. They teach at the University of Oregon. John is teaching in the product design program there. What you see here is a kitchen that they have designed using a lot of salvaged wood and simple materials. There's a really wonderful poetic quality to this, with the idea that this is the clouds. When you wash your dishes, you put the dishes back up, the rain falls down and nourishes the plants. The plants then are used to prepare your food at the kitchen table, or at the kitchen surface rather, and then when you are finished with preparing the food, you put the refuse down into the composting bin, so there's an immediate cycle that goes around that brings in sort of natural qualities, natural cycles into the kitchen and into the practice of eating and nourishing yourself. John comes from a background in ceramics. He has a BFA from Alfred University in ceramics. So, they both studied at Eindhoven. So it's a wonderful example of some of what's happening with the relationship between craft and design, where it's looking back to modernism, but re-evaluating modernism in a way that preserves some of the clean lines and aesthetics, but also brings in the sustainability questions that I think younger designers are really interested in, and craftspeople are interested in today. This piece by Heidi Schwegler, and Heidi is a professor at Oregon College of Art and Craft here in Portland. But Heidi is somebody who is incredibly skilled. She's trained as a metalsmith, and she's incredibly skilled with her hands, but one of the conflicts that a lot of craft-based artists have is how do they embrace their hand skills while still emphasizing the conceptual aspects of their work. And so what Heidi ended up doing is purchasing a very inexpensive 1950s melamine set off of eBay, and then poured tons of labor into the work. So all of these piercings and all of the sawing out was done by hand with a saw. It's not laser cut. So she's pushed all of her labor into this. But it's not just the transformation of something that's inexpensive into something that now you only handle with a white glove. She also brings out the history of materials and material practice. And as many people know, melamine was this great, wonderful industrial material that provided an alternative to porcelain, which broke and you couldn't put in the dishwasher and you had to replace. And melamine was this great thing that let every man have lots of color and ability to clean things and buy things inexpensively. But when that all came about, the Chinese industry that was centered around porcelain came out with a lot of anti-melamine propaganda to say that this is going to cause cancer, etc. And as we know now, it does cause problems, and there's a lot of issues and political issues with melamine as this modern material that now we know is problematic. But what Heidi has done is reference that history by sawing a Ming Dynasty pattern into this. So when you look down onto the piece, the shadow that that you see on the kitchen Korean table surface is references this Ming Dynasty pattern. So you get a lot of that embedded history in there. And so this is these are two great examples, I think, of the kind of work that is happening with artists today, where the line between art, craft, and design is meshing and melding and overlaps in certain ways, but there's still certain things that are very specific to design and specific to craft and specific to art embedded in there, and yet you can examine all of them from each of those angles and not really lose anything in the conversation. They're all three separate subjects that overlap quite a bit. Because we're a smaller city, it's also a community where you have to learn to work outside of those norms that you would get in other cities. We don't have a big collector base, we don't have huge industries supporting a lot of the arts organizations and things like that. We have some, but not like what you'd get in Philadelphia or New York or Chicago or places like that. So you have to come up with new models. So there's a really strong entrepreneurial spirit that happens in Portland, and that has led to a lot of shoe designers moving out here, bike designers. The craft community has been huge here for decades. When you live out on the West Coast, and shipping in the 40s, for example, was incredibly expensive, worse than it is even today, you'd have to figure out how to make your own things because you had to have some things on your table to serve dinner and so forth. This became a place where people learned how to do it themselves because they didn't have the ability necessarily to get it from elsewhere. It also opened up a really nice way to define things for yourself, because it's a newer city. We're not beholden to a lot of the older traditions in some ways that other cities are. So Portland as a community has been able to look to Asia and to look to Europe and to the rest of the United States, but there's a lot of picking and choosing that can happen here where you can really do things your own way.